Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to meet with US President Donald Trump in Florida's Mar-a-Lago. Key topic of discussion will be Zelensky's 20-point proposal for peace between Russia and Ukraine. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov says European Union troops in Ukraine would be legitimate targets for Russia. Lavrov, without providing evidence, also accused European politicians of being driven by ambitions in their relations with Kyiv. Fresh clashes have been reported in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo in Uvira, despite a US-brokered peace deal reaffirmed by Kinshasa and Kigali. United Nations has renewed its call for an immediate ceasefire in Sudan. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres highlighted the humanitarian crisis with nearly 12 million displaced since the war began. Dhaka police says that the two primary suspects in Inqilab Moncho Sharif Osman Hadi's killing have fled to India from Myanmar to Meghalaya. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung appoints Lee Hae-hoon, a former opposition lawmaker, as budget minister. Lee says the new minister aligns with the president's goal of both pursuing economic growth and improving social life. Coupang's founder and chairman Kim Bom has issued a public apology following a major customer data leak. Kim has promised a compensation plan for affected customers as soon as possible. Hackers have forced gaming giant Ubisoft to shut down all servers of popular first-person shooter Rainbow Six Siege after a breach left millions of players with impossible amounts of in-game currency and exclusive skins. All right, viewers, let's start with the top focus now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Donald Trump are set to meet in Florida as the people in Kyiv watch with both hope and doubt. The talks will focus on a possible plan to end the war in Ukraine, even as major differences remain. Just a day before the meeting, Russia launched heavy missile and drone attacks across Ukraine, cutting power and heating in parts of Kyiv. Let's in fact listen in to some Ukrainians.
Чесно, я думаю, що ні. Бо ми вже бачили ці перемовини і домовленості, коли позавчора, вчора, був знову обстріл. Тому я думаю, що це все Росія буде максимально тягнути час. І, я думаю, що точно нічого не буде. Тобто це буде перемовини, потім ще одні, але ні до чого це не буде.
Миру. Хочеться миру. Саме основне. Хочеться миру, більш нічого. Очікуємо, надіємося, віримо. Надіємося і віримо в це, що в найближчі часи прийде цей мир. Хочеться надіятися, дуже хочеться.
Просто, щоб все це закінчилось, але це наше бажання. Ми нічого не можемо на це ніяк не можемо цим керувати зовсім. Тому всім здоров'я, сил та терпіння.
And moving ahead to news from Bangladesh, Dhaka police say that two key suspects in the murder of political leader Sharif Osman Hadi have fled to India, triggering fresh tension between Dhaka and New Delhi. The Dhaka Metropolitan Police confirms that the suspects crossed into India through Haluaghat border in Bangladesh's Mymensingh district and entered the Indian state of Meghalaya with help of local associates. Police named the suspects as Faisal Kareem Masood and Alamgir Sheikh. Officials say the men were received by a local contact after crossing the border and were later driven to Tura city in Meghalaya. Bangladesh police claim Indian authorities have detained two individuals who allegedly helped the suspects escape. The Bangladesh government says it is working closely with India through formal and informal channels to secure the suspects' arrest and extradition. Osman Hadi, a prominent political leader, died after masked gunmen shot him on December 12, triggering massive protests, attacks on media and diplomatic offices. I request Gautam Mukherjee, who is a senior journalist, to join me in this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee, for joining me here. Do you think these allegations have any substance, although the Bangladesh Dhaka police have said that those who helped the suspected killers flee allegedly to India have been held? Um, how real can their charge be?
It's difficult to say at this point. It is plausible, but at the same time, it seeks to implicate India in the murder, and that does not seem very accurate.
Right.
Other reports have said that Yunus and his council were responsible for killing Hadi, and so it is quite likely that Yunus and his council have concocted this in order to implicate India.
All right, that's again a very strong statement coming in from you, though. But do you think this is going to further deteriorate the ties between India and Bangladesh?
Well, until the elections, the ties are extremely bad, and it couldn't really get worse unless there is actual violence across the borders. So there is really little hope of the relationship between Bangladesh and India improving till after the elections, which are not too far away. They're in February. And if they are held on time, and if, for example, the BNP were to win as opposed to the Islamists, then things could start to go on the mend.
But want to say that BNP is increasingly inching more towards the Islamists, even possibly in talks for an alliance with the Inqilab Moncho?
Politically, that may indeed be so, but I think BNP is a mainstream party, and insofar as it is definitely more inclined to the Islamists than the Sheikh Hasina's party ever was. So an alliance by itself does not imply that they will go all the way into a radical Islamist sort of mode. I think they wish to win the elections and restore some semblance of order as well as economic revival for Bangladesh. So let us wait and see what this amounts to. Of course, Pakistan and the ISI won't like it. They would prefer Bangladesh to be highly radicalized. So the situation right now is in flux.
Well, certainly. But thanks for now, Mr. Mukherjee, for your opinion. And with that, viewers, we're now going to proceed. There's news now coming in from Africa. The United Nations has renewed its call for an immediate ceasefire in Sudan as the conflict between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces escalates. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres highlighted the humanitarian crisis with nearly 12 million displaced and tens of thousands dead since the war began in April 2023. Fighting has intensified in Darfur and Kordofan, with the RSF seizing key areas like the oil field. Violence has spread across borders, including drone strikes that killed Chadian soldiers. However, the conflict is also threatening regional security and stability, with the UN condemning mass killings and humanitarian violations of rights. Despite a peace proposal from Sudan's Prime Minister, the RSF rejected it and no breakthrough has been achieved. All right, viewers, the latest details now coming in as far as the ceasefire between the Sudanese army and the RSF is concerned. The United Nations has once again stepped in, asking for an immediate ceasefire in Sudan. Antonio Guterres highlighted the humanitarian crisis and the displacement of over 12 million people and the deaths of at least tens of thousands to call for a ceasefire. Darfur and Kordofan apparently remain the hotspots as the RSF has seized key areas like the oil field, Heglig oil field here. Violence has spread even across the borders, including drone strikes that killed some soldiers of Chad. Also under threat remains the security of the region. But as far as the UN statement goes, it condemns the mass killings and human rights violations, asking for a ceasefire to be restored. And despite a peace proposal from Sudan's Prime Minister, RSF has not accepted it yet, leading to a stalemate. So far, no achievement of a breakthrough. All right, viewers, with that, we are now going to proceed. Now, moving ahead, let's also tell you that polls have opened in the Central African Republic's capital, Bangui, as voters cast their ballots in a tightly controlled presidential election. Election officials were seen setting up ballot boxes early Sunday, with long queues forming at several polling stations. The vote is widely expected to return President Faustin Archange Touadera to power for a third term. His path was cleared by the 2023 constitutional referendum that removed presidential term limits, a move that was in fact criticized by opposition groups. The opponents accused authorities of repression, uneven campaigning conditions, and holding the election amid persistent security concerns in parts of the country. Many voters say that they turned out despite that, driven by fears of renewed instability and hopes for change after years of conflict and economic hardship. Let's listen into some of the voters.
Parce que je suis centrafricain et c'est un devoir pour tout un chacun. C'est un devoir pour tout un chacun et c'est à cause de ça que nous allons relever nos défis. Si je ne vote pas aujourd'hui, notre pays risque d'aller dans le chaos. Si je vote aujourd'hui, c'est pour relever le défi.
On tant voulu le changement. Et si quelqu'un veut le changement, il doit se lever pour aller voter pour le changement. On ne peut pas s'asseoir au quartier et dire que oui, voilà, il y a des choses qui se passent ainsi. Non, le temps là est révolu. Actuellement, nous devons nous lever comme un seul peuple, venir faire un choix souverain, réfléchi, pour que notre avenir, le destin de notre avenir soit rassuré.
All right, viewers, let's also tell you that a referendum in 2023 had scrapped the term limit of the president, and Touadera had sought support system from Russia and Rwanda. His victory would likely advance Russian interests in the region. As of now, Central African Republic President Faustin Archange Touadera is seeking a third term as elections have kick-started in the unstable country. All right, joining me in this discussion is Ayanuga Olugbenga Paul. He's a public affairs analyst and he joins us from Lagos in Nigeria. Thank you very much, Mr. Paul, for joining me in this discussion. How likely is it for Touadera to return in this election?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. Touadera seems to be the clear favorite because a lot of things are working in his favor. There are about six other opposition figures, among whom are two former prime ministers, Andue and Dulu Gele. Now, the two former prime ministers were almost disqualified in the build-up to the election because they hold dual citizenship. Before that issue was resolved, and by the time the issue was resolved, it was already late into the campaign, which means they had very little campaign, which means their campaign message may not have gotten to the far-flung corners of the country enough for the people to see them as an alternative to DERA. But and also the fact that the incumbent president has enough financial war chest to be able to prosecute this election compared to many of the opposition figures who are contesting against him. So the election looks like a mere formality that is just going to pass. They recently changed their constitution in 2023 to be able to remove presidential term limits, and that is why the president is contesting for a third term, and with the strong backing that he has from Russia, the Wagner mercenary group, I think it's going to cost him to victory, basically.
How much Russian interest is in this election, and if Tudera returns to power for the third term, as is likely, what does Russia have to gain in the region?
All Western countries have something to gain in the region. Don't forget that just like Congo, the Central African Republic is also mineral rich. They have vast deposits of rare earth metals, uranium, diamond, gold, cobalt, lithium, and so on. And the president is open to do business with whoever is willing to do business with his country, and Russia seems to be the one very, very interested in them at the moment. While Russia is interested, we would be foolhardy to think that the US, China, and other countries are also not interested. But I think Russia brings better quality of bargaining to the table that favors the government of the country and maybe the people of the country by extension, compared to what Western axis of power and the US brings to the table. So that is why Russia is preferred. A lot of Western media want to parrot it as though it is Russia that is influencing the election. No, all Western country has influence in the election. It just seems that they are not able to back the strongest candidate, because I'm sure that all the other candidates who had backings from other Western interests who are hopeful to enter into the country should the candidate they back win. So this issue of parroting that it's about Russian interest is just a way to discredit the elections simply because the Western interest lost out in the power struggle to support the candidate that is likely to win. All Western interest in all the election in Africa, maybe with the exception of South Africa, even in South Africa, the white minority who control the majority of the business there, they always ensure that it is the candidate that aligns with their business interest that wins the presidential election. And that is why, despite the shortcoming of the ANC over several years now, they still continue to hold sway in that country, because the Western axis of power would not allow, for example, a radical group like the EFF to emerge and win the presidency in that country. So almost all elections in the world, and especially in Africa that is struggling, has different Western interest and alignment. But in the case of Central African Republic, Russia seems to be on top at the moment.
All right, sure. And as far as the Russian Wagner mercenaries are concerned, Mali, Burkina Faso also have their stakes. How are those nations going to be affected with Tudora's re-election?
Well, I think it will bolster their confidence. And let's not forget that whilst everybody want to make it seem like, Russia this, Russia that, Russia gives better deal. Russia gives better respect to the people. In the history of colonization of Africa, while the rest of Europe, colonized Africa, and they committed a lot of atrocities in their colonial activity before many African countries got their independence eventually. We never saw Russia colonize any African country. We've always seen Russia being neutral and being interested in just business and not controlling the country. So the Wagner Group is just to protect the business interest of Russia, and I think the business interest of Russia gives fair and equitable deal to the government of those countries. So having Todera win the election will bolster their confidence, and hopefully that alignment might, with the success recorded, if the government in all these countries begin to do wonderful things that will make that are visible to the people, other countries will begin to take note, and other mineral-rich countries might begin to reassess their alignment with Western axis of power, such as Britain, France, and even Belgium and the US. They will begin to reassess all their alignment because they also want better deal for the benefit of their people. And so the election and victory of Todera will go in a long way also to cement that across the region.
All right, yeah, indeed. Thanks for your opinion there, Mr. Paul, and for joining us here at NewsX World. And with that, we have some breaking news now coming in from Myanmar. We're now learning that polls have concluded in the first phase of voting. Some 103 of Myanmar's 330 townships had headed to polls, with the next phase of voting now set to commence in the first week of January. I request Gautam Mukherjee to join me back in the discussion on this. Thanks very much, Mr. Mukherjee, for joining me back now. Initial turnout, I'm learning, is much lower than the elections in 2020. It's also, important given that it's the first one since the Janta took over. What is it really speaking? Yeah,
it's an important election insofar as it gives a chance for the people of Myanmar to express their opinion, and while the junta is likely to be re-elected, it does give various other parties also a chance to compete and figure out where they stand.
All right, and talking about the elections itself, they are being held even when the civil war continues to be, continues to rage. Also, there is no real opposition against Janta. How fair can the results of this election be, and thus, the status quo in Myanmar?
The status quo is likely to continue, but the civil war has its roots in much deeper ethnic conflict, which has been raging in Myanmar for decades. When you had a civilian government, you still had a lot of ethnic conflict between the Buddhists and others. And this continues with the military junta in power. And effective opposition has a lot to do with finances. And there aren't very many people financing the opposition at all. And then you've got ethnic groups like the Rohingyas and others who are...
For now, thank you very much, Gautam Mukherjee, for joining me in this discussion. And with that, viewers, let's proceed. Let's also, in fact, give you more context as far as the elections are concerned. In areas where no voting took place, citizens have criticized the elections. According to the displaced citizens, the elections will not improve the country's political situation, with airstrikes and atrocities likely to continue. The military coup, which began in 2021, has led to widespread displacement, and the National League for Democracy party, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, is not participating. The rebel groups call the elections a sham, calling it prolonged military rule. Despite promises of peace, Myanmar remains engulfed in violence with thousands of displaced civilians seeking refuge in neighboring countries. Let's hear it.
ဒီအခုလုံးမဲ့ရွေးကောက်ပွဲကနေပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ဒီရွေးကောက်ပွဲပြီးသွားရင်ပဲဖြစ်ဖြစ်ကျွန်တော်ပြည်သူအနေနဲ့တော့နိုင်ငံရေးရှင်းနေရထူးထူးပြန်လဲကောင်းမွန်လာလိမ့်မယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်တို့ထင်မြင်မိပါဘူးဘာလို့လဲဆိုတော့ဒီရွေးကောက်ပွဲပြီးသွားလို့ရှိရင်လဲကျွန်တော်တို့ပြည်သူတွေနေထိုင်တဲ့ဒေသတွေကိုဒီကြောင်းတိုက်ခိုက်မှုတွေနဲ့ကြမ်းဖက်မှုတွေလည်းဆက်လက်ရှိနေအောင်မယ်လို့ပဲထင်မိပါတယ်ဟုတ်ကျွန်တော်တို့စစ်ပေးချောင်ဒုက္ခတဲ့တရားအနေနဲ့ကတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့နိုင်ငံရေးရှင်းနေကိုအများဆုံးပြန်လဲကောင်းမွန်လာစေလိုပါတယ်အဲ့ဒါမှလည်းကျွန်တော်တို့ကိုယ့်ရွာကိုယ့်ဒေသကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ကြောက်ရွံ့မှုကင်းနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ပြန်နေနိုင်မှာပေါ့နော်
ရွေးကောက်ပွဲဆိုတာပြည်သူအလုံးပါဝင်တဲ့ရွေးကောက်ပွဲဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်ဒီချိန်ဒီခါမှာဆိုရင်ရွေးကောက်ပွဲဆိုတာ25%တာပဲဖြစ်မြောက်မယ်လို့အမှုအနေနဲ့ထင်ပါတယ်။ဒါနဲ့ပြည်သူမပါတဲ့ရွေးကောက်ပွဲပြည်သူအလုံးမပါဝင်တဲ့ရွေးကောက်ပွဲဖြစ်တဲ့အတွက်ရွေးကောက်ပွဲဟာဖြစ်မြောက်တဲ့ရွေးကောက်ပွဲမဟုတ်ဘူးလို့ထင်တယ်
ရွေးကောက်ပွဲကတော့တိတ်ပြီးထူးထူးခြားခြားဖြစ်လာမယ်လို့တော့မမြင်ပါဘူးသူတို့အာဏာတည်မြဲအတွက်ပဲသူတို့စစ်ယူနီဖောင်းကနေဒီအချက်သားယူနီဖောင်းကိုပြောင်းပြီးတော့အဲ့လိုအာဏာဆုပ်ကိုင်ဖို့တဲ့သူတို့ကဒီရွေးကောက်ပွဲကိုထပ်ပြီးလုပ်တယ်လို့ပဲကျွန်တော်တို့အဲ့လိုပဲမြင်ပါတယ်ရွေးကောက်ပွဲပြီးရင်လည်းဆက်ပြီးတော့ပုံချင်းတိုက်ခိုက်နေအောင်ပါပဲဒီရွေးကောက်ပွဲကကျွန်တော်တို့ဘာလို့ယူလာမလဲဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်ရခိုင်တွေနေတော့ဘာမှထူးထူးခြားခြားဖြစ်လာမယ်လို့လည်းမထင်ပါဘူးညှော်လင့်ရတော့မဟုတ်ပါဘူးဒါပေမဲ့ဒီရွေးကောက်ပွဲကဘလို့ပဲဖြစ်ရွေးကောက်ပွဲပြီးသွားမယ်ဥစ္စာရွေးကောက်ပွဲပြီးရင်လွှတ်တော်တွေပါတယ်ပေါ်လာမှာပေါ့လွှတ်တော်ပေါ်တဲ့အချိန်ကျတော့ဒီတိုင်းပြည်ရဲ့အပြောင်းလဲတွေတစ်ခုများနည်းနည်းလေးများဖြစ်လာမလားပြီးတော့ဒီဘယ်လိုပြောမလဲဒီပြည်တွင်းစစ်ပေါ့ပြည်တွင်းစစ်ပဋိပက္ခတွေအတွက်တစ်ခုထွက်ပေါင်းများဖြစ်မလားအဲ့လိုရေးလေးတော့ညှော်လင့်တာပေါ့
ဒုစလေးတန်းနေမလားရေကောက်ပွေး reality ကိုကျွန်တော်လေးမောင်တော်လောက်မောင်ခါရဆိုကေကောင်းကြီးကျွန်တော်တို့ဖက်မှာအတိပဟင်းလို့ပြောလို့မရဆိုကေအခုအချိန်မှာဆိုကေပို့တော့ပါကျွန်တော်တို့ဖက်မှာနေပြီးတဲ့နာပါတီစုံရေကောက်ပွေးလေးမှာ pride အဲဒီနောက်ထပ်နေပြီးတဲ့နေမီတီတီဒီမရောတီတီမှာရေကောက်ပွေးတော့ pride လို့မရှိဆိုကေဒီရေကောက်ပွေးကတော့ကျွန်တော်တို့အနေနဲ့ဆိုကေဒီရေကောက်ပွေးတွေကကျွန်တော်တို့အနှောင်းလက်ချက်တော့တခုတစုံ pride လေးမရှိဆိုလေပပူနွေ့ဒီကောင်းအများကြီးတော့မကရာတီပါနဲ့အဲဆိုကေဆေရာနင်းကနေဆိုကေကျွန်တော်တို့အမရာဦးမှာဆိုအဓိကpricing လေးတခု price ခါပါတယ်ရအခရင်နေမှာဆိုကျွန်တော်ဆိုကေရအခရင်တွေကတော့လုံးမထောနိုင်သေးပါအဲဆိုကေအခုရေကောက်ပွေးကိုဆိုကျွန်တော်တို့စိတ်ထဲမှာတော့မရှိနေဆိုကေဒီအခုတော့တရန်ထားလောက်မှပဲရေကောက်ပွေးရှိဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော်ဆိုကေတတိထားမင်းဆိုရ price
All right, viewers, no real opposition. People calling the Myanmar elections a sham. We'll watch out as the results trickle in. But for now, that's all we have time for. Do keep watching NewsX World for all major news and updates from around the world.